Ladies and gentlemen, I am here with the man who has a touch of Asperger's.
Brian, are you sure it's just a touch?
I don't think you have any Asperger's. We are here, though. Well, I'll tell you what you are. You're a mixed mental artist.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by proxy, so the fuck am I, because I've been hanging out with you.
Well, but Brian, you're still like an artist. That's what an artist is supposed to do.
Only when I want to impress. I was in San Diego, and I was with several people who work in the comedy business, mostly young men and young girls in their 20s. And I began to pontificate.
Oh, Jesus.
But I wasn't doing a good job because they were more interested in the tequila and the wine. And, you gotta pick your spots.
Well,
but it goes back to what we were saying.
Yeah.
If you want to get to people, you better learn how to be funny about it or sing songs with it. Which I'm not a musician, but I think I can be funny with.
Which is why I think there's a changing of the guard in this podcast, Brian. Up until now, the power has been my responsibility to bring all this science to you.
Yes.
But now it's your job to transform all those ideas into a form that the people, your adoring fans, can appreciate.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about orthodoxy and message, and it's very interesting because I've been reading this book on sort of the breakdown of the Bible, the Old and the New Testament, but especially the New Testament. And what's very interesting is that there is the Apostle Paul, who never met Christ, but I think he met Peter and several. He was this sort of, real zealot, a rabbi who persecuted the Christians, has his conversion on the road to Damascus, and decides he's seen Jesus and all that. But what was interesting is that most of the Bible, the letters to the Philippians and the Thessalonians and the Corinthians and all that, was essentially, hey guys, you're getting off the mark. There are all these Jewish Christians that are trying to tell you that the book of Leviticus should still be followed. And he was always saying, no, it's not what you eat. No, it's not how you dress. No, it's not whether or not you're married. It's about faith in this Christ, in this God.
It's about the core principles.
Yeah. Well, really, yeah. Don't forget about love and don't forget about faith. He tried to simplify it way more than even Christ did, it seems.
And even tried to make it about the spirit in which you're approaching things rather than being litigious or about the rules or the dogma.
Yeah, and so then if you follow that, there were lots of people that would come into these churches and say, this is a great idea, love your enemy and turn the other cheek, and this guy Christ must be God. But let's just add a little of this other naturalistic religion as well. I mean, there are other gods, and by the way, the stars tell you a lot about how to, I've got several examples of how astrology really helps. No, you fuckers. And he would write another letter and say no, or he'd go there and say, let me explain how you got to keep that stuff out. And it was really a constant battle for him to figure out a way to keep the message pure, right? But I think that what I was thinking about the contrast between that, this guy was a real zealot. I mean, he had this deep belief, and he apparently performed his own miracles. He let a snake bite him, and all this stuff. But I think that I was just thinking about what kind of a job that was. By the way, ultimately got him executed, with his rabble rousing. And then apparently the Romans probably killed him because he was just causing too much problem with the Jews, who were like, this guy is literally trying to get rid of our religion. He was a rabbi, and I don't know what the fuck he's doing now. The fundamental difference here is that mixed mental arts, and it's very, very encouraging and exciting because it's quite the opposite, but it's a dojo of ideas.
Yep.
It's not a dojo of faith. It's not a dojo of orthodoxy. It's a dojo of ideas.
It's a
dojo. Let the best idea win.
It's specifically about breaking orthodoxy. So the danger is, and this is something that has already been discussed on the Mixed Mental Arts Facebook group, is that an orthodoxy creeps in. Orthodoxy
it certainly does.
Yeah,
it does, and this is something else that I was thinking about. Paul was very, very suspicious of human words. I mean, and even epistemology, because I think Isaiah in the Old Testament, your heart is your biggest deceptor. It goes back to this new science, really, of Jonathan Haidt and people who kind of talk about how you are not aware of how your emotional framework colors what you consider to be truth.
Yeah.
And so it seems that Paul understood that way back when and kind of said, you better be careful of people that can turn a phrase, that can speak well, and that can essentially philosophize and reason, because that can get you in trouble. You've just sometimes got to have faith. Now, I think there's a rebuttal to that, and I think that you need reason, and I think you need philosophy, and you need mathematical truth. But I thought that was very interesting as well, though, because I think what he was trying to say is that there have to be certain stone cold or ironclad principles, rules, like you can't just kill somebody because it would be rationally convenient, that because it would make mathematical sense. Well, I don't know what
I think the key thing is, what is orthodoxy, right? That's the basic problem of orthodoxy is ortho, right? So there's a right or correct way of thinking, as opposed to heterodoxy. And John Haidt is, has this thing, the Heterodox Academy, where the point is to bring in lots and lots of different perspectives so that you're constantly not settling into the idea that, this tail of the elephant is a rope, right? That you're constantly having people who see different parts of the elephant, and so that there's
so you can get closer to the truth.
That's right.
And so that's what science is, isn't it?
That's what science is. That's what science's principle is. But in very much the same way, there's this scientific principle, just as there's this Christian principle, and then there's the establishment. And part of what John Haidt is trying to fix is, hey, an orthodoxy has settled in within academia because people come from the same liberal biases, and so there's not enough diversity of thought to have that process of continual renewal where ideas are being challenged and you're innovating and you're coming up with new perspectives.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. The scholars are so narrowly trained.
Well, exactly. And I think crucially...
And by the way, I think that, I don't think that's... I think that we're not the only ones talking about that, right?
Well, we're not the only ones talking about it, but the question is, how do you change that? Because...
You change it first, in my opinion, by first letting people know who are in these echo chambers that they are that it doesn't have to be so.
No.
That there is another way to approach this. In fact, that you may very well be like, I think it was Václav Smil or one of those guys who said you're at the bottom of a well and you can only see your sliver of the sky. When you kind of let people know that they might very well be wearing blinders, they might be at the bottom of a well, they might be on an echo chamber, etc. Human beings tend to they may disagree with you, but they'll take a look at it.
Well, they will, but crucially, I think you have to, this really comes down to the field of dreams. So
if you build it, they will come.
And you have to, I think...
Well, I was going to say, you've also got to give them a way out.
Yeah, and you've got to give them a path to dignity, a path to a better way, and crucially, you have to actually build the alternative, because you can endlessly sit there, and this goes back to what we talked about with Teddy Roosevelt. You can endlessly be the critic, and you can endlessly talk about, they should do this, they shouldn't do this, but you actually have to build the alternative.
You're right.
And get in the ring, and that's very much the direction that we're now going in, where people are coming in and they're helping to evolve this thing. How do you move this thing forward? And crucially, there's a lot to learn from Jesus, because Jesus was...
Welcome to the Christian podcast, everyone. Two non-Christians.
Talking about Jesus.
I'm talking about Paul and Jesus. Jesus Christ. Keep going. No pun intended.
But there's a lot to learn from Jesus or the Buddha or Benjamin Franklin or any of the great teachers, because great teachers teach in terms of simple stories that have principles at the heart of them that you can pull out.
Well, we were saying that, Einstein was known for that.
Yeah.
Einstein, Lawrence Krauss, who I have a newfound respect for. I listened to about 2 hours of him on the Joe Rogan podcast. And I had said Lawrence wasn't such a good bridge builder, not such a good missionary for science. He was not as dismissive of religion as I thought. I think that he realizes and understands that religion pays. We owe tribute to Christianity, for example, for... religion is important in how it focuses the mind and how it, gives you a moral framework to not do certain things, for a lot of reasons. But I think that what the challenge with someone like Lawrence Krauss is that he's a theoretical physicist, and when he starts talking about black holes and invisible the collider in Switzerland,
Large Hadron Collider,
and all those things, and I mean he's doing his very best to simplify for apes like me and Joe Rogan and everybody else, but he it's really difficult, right? He that's a language. It's almost like he's trying to impart. He's kind of speaks Greek fluently, and he's trying to speak it very slowly. It's very difficult unless you have background. So in that sense, I think that's a big challenge, right? So getting sort of the idea out there that science is incredibly wondrous and infinite. Great, yes, God bless, of course. And he said, you don't have to understand everything. Just kind of enjoy how vast it is and how amazing and how complex. But I think you and I were speaking about how, a huge part of getting ideas out there is, like, if you look at all the books we've been reading, you were asking me, what did I get from most of those books 2 or 3 years later? It's usually the main idea, thinking fast and slow. Well, there's an elephant to our brain, and then there's the fast thinker, and then there's the cheetah, or whatever you want to call it, for lack of a hummingbird. You think very quickly sometimes, and you think very slow. And then certain problems require a great deal of slow thinking. Be aware of that. Learn how to control your fast thinking mechanism, that part of your brain, with the slow thinker. Let the slow thinker drive the fast thinker.
Yep, and slowly nudge that elephant over time in a different direction.
That's right. And again, so there are, everybody should know that when you read these books with these great thinkers, a lot of time, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a central idea. There's an idea. The theme of the book can be explained to somebody, and the rest of the book primarily is an argument for that particular idea with example.
And crucially, it's usually an argument that's targeted at someone
another
closer.
orthodoxy, or...
Yeah, well, and it's often aimed sort of either at other academics,
yes,
or at other college-educated people who are really atomistic, and you have to lay out a huge amount of evidence, and the book ends up endlessly belaboring the same point over and over and over again. And in practice, very often, the point is colossally obvious. So what I find fascinating is you contrast Thinking Fast and Slow, where the main point of the book is summed up in the title. You could literally not open the book and get the main idea, with the video of Trigglypuff, right? And the video of Trigglypuff, I don't think that the person who made that video read the work of Kahneman and Tversky.
Remind our listeners what the
video
of
Trigglypuff
was.
So there was this social justice warrior on a college campus, and somebody was saying, there was a speech going on, and they were saying things that Trigglypuff did not like. And so she's flipping out, and she's saying, racist, apologist, all these sorts of very fast-thinking responses. And somebody has edited the video so that they have put in a frame where they do like a computer loading bar, and they say, calculating response. And so what does that really mean? They figured out that this person is all fast-thinking. Yeah. She's not using her slow thinking. Yeah. Now, that's observed, and that's the core principle of Kahneman. Now, Kahneman, wow, I like how my voice went up there. Kahneman. Kahneman.
I don't think you've used very much at all.
I think it's been remarkably under control. But, Brian, that's because of where we're recording.
We're recording inside my Tesla. Tesla.
And it is remarkable.
I kept calling it a Lexus.
In the future, Brian, where we are right now, all of my verbal tics have been worked out. So if we just record in the future...
Excellent!
I will have no more... I will have done all my slow thinking and retrained my elephant.
Chris D'Elia likes to rub in my face that he makes more money than me. And he said, dude, people keep asking me if I'm from the future. And I was like, what do you mean? They go, well, your car. Because he bought this new Audi. He's such an asshole. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
I think your car's much cooler.
Yeah.
Anyway, and we're going to make sure that you're much more famous and much more successful than Chris D'Elia. That's the major mission of Mixed Mental Arts.
You know me. Being famous and wealthy is everything to me at 50. That's all I care about. It's funny as I get more quote unquote famous, or at least, I get recognized by name now and all that weird stuff, and I have money and I'm 50 and it's just not what I thought. I would have loved this at 30 because I would have just used it to get nothing but tail. I would have gotten herpes. I would have been on antibiotics constantly, and I would have had so many children, all over the place. I know me, and
So
thank God.
You really
thank
did
God
your
at 50, I'm getting some. It's kind of slowly happened. Where I'm almost a little more famous than I was.
Yeah, but it's the best of both worlds because you're getting that experience without the herpes.
I am.
Yeah.
I am. You're so right about that.
But so
right.
Kahneman goes through and he does all these experiments, he does all this research, and then he sums up all of those ideas with thinking fast and slow.
Mm-hmm.
But then simultaneously, whoever made the Trigglypuff video extracted the same principle.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to work through all of that science and research to find it. So this tells you something about how humans spot patterns. Humans spot patterns, they observe a phenomenon, and then they extract these core principles. That is, Trigglypuff contains a hypothesis. It contains a theory about human thinking, that there is fast and slow thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, in general, the wisdom of crowds is good at finding these things. And the interesting thing is, if you ran in parallel one version where science is running along, and then another version where in parallel the internet was just left to do its thing, how many of these ideas like the Dunbar number or Descartes' error or humans' social power being social intelligence?
Well, no, I'll answer that question. I think that the ideas may have been out there, but you do need someone to articulate those ideas, make them accessible, and organize them.
You do need that.
Yeah, because the problem is that you see so much of what human beings do is, especially if they've educated themselves in one way or another, when I say educate, man, I mean sometimes when you've been raised properly. I notice, again, I wasn't raised this way, and this is going to turn into like the Christian thing, but I noticed that kids who went to Catholic school through their whole upbringing usually got a very good education. They read a lot of good writers, and they come from big Italian or Catholic families, Irish families. I have noticed from my experience that they tend to be pretty psychologically sound. Yes, there's guilt and all this stuff that goes on, but I don't know if psychologically sound is the way to put it, but they certainly seem to be less confused about how to behave and live their life. There's less complication. And I think that that's sort of the value of sometimes an education, whether it comes from your family or it comes from your schooling. It provides you with a framework you don't really have to think about. It provides for you almost a paint-by-numbers way to live your life in an effective and productive, fulfilling way.
And that's what a culture is.
That's what a culture is. That's exactly right. That's what a culture is. And then you can get into the debate about, whether or not certain cultures are better than others for the environment that we are now living in, the ever-changing environment. That's a whole different subject.
And I think the key is that part of it is that there are some things, even though we are going to be challenging orthodoxy along the way, that there will be core principles that are actually quite useful and quite robust that you can use and feel pretty comfortable with, right? 100%. Descartes' error is a stable idea. I can't imagine that anything's going to come along that's going to destabilize it. The Dunbar number is a stable idea. We're not going to suddenly realize, oh, you know what?
I know more than 150.
Yeah, or, the number may move a little bit, but it's not going to turn out to be 7 billion. So part of what's going to happen is that there's, I think you can be so paranoid about orthodoxy that you reject any ideas as being set or settled. And the key is figuring out, okay, what are robust principles? What are those things like the scientific principle and the Christian principle, love thy neighbor as thyself, and change your mind in light of evidence? Those are solid principles. Humanity has already figured those out.
Camille Paglia was talking about this. There's so many radicals by their very nature. Radicals and fanatics want to burn the whole fucking thing down. Yeah. Radicals, and you have a lot of these in academia nowadays, and always have probably, and you will always have radicals. They just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And without giving thought to the idea that maybe things happen for a reason. They've evolved a certain way for a very specific reason. And would again even if you burned it to ash. Because look at when I was talking to my father-in-law, who's been in the food business forever, and I was saying we need small family farms. We need family farms to come back to really raise our food, not this factory farming. And my father-in-law said, that's great, except for, guess what? Not every family farm is as productive as the other family farm. And now you got a difference in price. And you have a difference in how many eggs and how much comes out of that. So then what would happen is you'd have another family farm that was really good at it. You'd have a guy who was just an expert at it. And he'd say, dude, sell me your farm.
Yeah.
I can do it better. Let me do, and I'll give you a cut. And all of a sudden they'd be like, geez, he gave me more money than I'm making. Yeah, I'll do that. So that guy takes that over, and then he goes to another farm, and he goes, dude, you're not doing this well. I'm really good at it. We have this whole automation thing. I was able to buy more equipment. Look at how fast I do this. And the guy's like, damn, I can't compete with this guy anyway. I may as well sell out to him. And all of a sudden, you'd get these large conglomerates. I mean, look, some of these conglomerates are just too big, but the bottom line is, if you want your eggs when, how, and at a very cheap rate, you don't have an alternative. You don't have an alternative. Factory farming is how we feed a shitload of people.
And we may be able to evolve better ways of doing
Absolutely.
that. But the point is that there are solutions that are emergent that are evolutionarily sound and that have evolved for a reason. Democracy is a good system for making sure that everybody feels invested in the system and for gathering the information of lots and lots of different people with different knowledge. Yeah. It works like the Toyota production system. Now, how well is our democracy working right now? Not very well. Mm-hmm. But it needs to, the point is that we shouldn't necessarily tear down the democracy. We should fix it. Right? The system is not working properly. It needs to be tuned up. And this was, by the way, very much the point that, dare I say it, Dan Carlin made to Sam Harris. Even if you got rid of Islam, wouldn't something just like Islam reemerge?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and crucially, this comes down to the fact that humans are groupish. They're tribal, and we form cults, and everything is a cult.
It is, dude. It's so amazing to me, too, because you can go to Portland and Seattle, and I am telling you there's a uniform people wear.
Of course.
Maybe it's changing now, but boy, I'll tell you, white dudes and white gals with very pale skin, way too many random tattoos, sensible shoes, and strange facial hair.
Yeah.
And just as they try to be as sort of anti-sexual as possible, it seems to me. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, and I like it. There's a lot I like about it, but there's also a lot that's it's also a uniform.
And crucially, you know, their Holy Communion is some of the best coffee in the world.
100%. I don't even know the uniform. The religion is almost nihilism. It's almost sort of like having it being generally rudderless.
It's very much like the nihilists in The Big Lebowski. We believe in nothing, Lebowski. We believe in nothing.
Yes.
Yes. But that's the point. Cults emerge, religions emerge, and those religions are founded on different things. So, for example, today I was listening to, there's a great audio book that you can get on Audible from The Great Courses, Customs of the World. And it just incorporates all these other elements of how does culture work that we haven't necessarily unpacked yet in this podcast. But one of the examples, he's talking about Confucianism. And, you know, they say Confucianism is the religion of Li, right? The religion of this principle of sort of harmony and proper relations.
Is Confucianism, is that the same as Taoism?
No.
It's not.
It's not.
Do you know the difference?
I'm going to do my best to explain it, but I have a feeling that Isaiah Gulley, who has been writing around these Chinese sayings. Yeah.
Thank you, Isaiah Gulley. Thank you for Jennings Jenkins.
Jennings B. Jenkins.
Outstanding. Thank you to Kate Fogarty. Thank you to Nate McCabe.
Nate McCabe.
What a badass song. That was I tweeted that song. God damn it, I love you.
Brian Atoya, Matt Maurer, Nicole Lee Page, lots of
all these
the
mixed
Unicorn,
mental artists, all the mixed mental artists
who
are contributing to the dojo. It's
and the boys who had the Columbus meetup, the Columbus, Ohio meetup, super cool. So
you nerds,
you wonderful, glorious
you
nerds,
turbo nerds. God bless you all.
But so what were we talking about before this? Confucianism and Taoism, yeah. So Confucianism is about proper relationships. So the core is there's a proper relationship between the father and the son. The father is supposed to take care of the son and protect him, and in return, the son is supposed to give filial piety. So he's supposed to be loyal to the father. There are then a series of other relationships that are defined in terms of older brother to younger brother, husband to wife, ruler to people, and so on and so forth. And It's about establishing harmony within the community. And the idea of Confucius was that there are forms. There are forms of proper behavior. And when everybody follows the forms, society works. And when people start to break from the forms or are not fulfilling their proper roles, so when the father no longer provides for or protects for the son, and when the son no longer offers filial piety, that's when society starts to break down. And of course, that's the great anxiety of Chinese history, is the empire falling apart and descending into warring kingdoms. But there's a whole series of these behaviors. So, for example, one of the things they talk about in this book is why the Chinese use chopsticks. And
why do they? Because the fork and the spoon are and the knife are, I'm sorry, objectively superior.
Well,
I mean, I know one of the reasons they use chopsticks.
Go for it.
It gives your body more time to realize that it's full.
That wasn't the reason that was given in this thing. It may be one of the reasons.
Because it takes you longer to eat your food, so your stomach can catch up to your brain.
But it was also because they didn't want knives and forks at the table because that might lead to violence.
Well, it's a terrible reason, because it's not like when people are eating in Europe, they kill each other. But okay.
Well, but if you remember from the Better Angels of Our Nature, that the whole point of a large part of table manners was sort of to deal with those sorts of tendencies of people to just stab each other at the table.
Yeah.
So we've now been civilized to a degree where we don't engage in that sort of behavior.
Right.
But historically, these things must have been problems.
Probably. When I'm hungry.
When you're
I'll
hangry.
take food for my children.
Yeah. As opposed to Taoism, which is sort of much more mystical, and it's about the path or the way. That's what Tao means. Mm-hmm. And so it's, I believe, a much more sort of spiritual path. But I couldn't necessarily tell you, and it all centers around the I Ching.
Maybe there's a way of doing things, sort of a moral sense, a moral harmony one needs to align themselves with.
Yeah, but crucially, Confucianism is quite rigid and prescribed, whereas the Tao is much more mystical and improvisational and about exploration.
Okay.
And that that you're trying to find the way.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my understanding, but this is going off memory. But and then, I didn't know you were going to give me this pop quiz, Brian.
Sorry, buddy.
No, it's a good pop quiz.
Keep
me on my toes.
Keep you on your toes, brother.
But so, crucially, what we want to figure out as we're doing this mixed mental arts thing is figure out what are principles we can settle on, disseminate and popularize those, not just within our community, but then to the wider world. Mm-hmm. And then constantly be drawing in as much heterodoxy as possible. We want to be drawing in people who think differently, so that we're having to innovate.
Yeah, because we are really, in many ways, I'm always amazed at how smart people seem to continue to repeat the same pattern. So let's just take this giant bomb we dropped on Afghanistan, the Moab, the mother of all bombs. I liked it strategically in some ways. I like the idea that we sent a message to North Korea. I like rattling our sword at North Korea. I wouldn't say that otherwise, but I think North Korea needs a little sword rattling for the United States. And I like that they're letting them think that Donald Trump is unpredictable. I think that's going to keep them from, being as irresponsible as they want to be. And dangerous, but it's a whole different thing. But I was thinking, as they dropped that mother of all bombs on ISIS in Afghanistan, I was wondering how many bombs we have dropped. Like, what's the tonnage? How many pounds of bombs have we dropped over the past 13 years? And how has it worked out? There have been successes, but not as many as we'd like. And I thought to myself, if we took all that money, it's a weird thing to say, but if we took all that money, and I know I'm being, but if we took all that money, it's not the original idea, and just paid the Taliban to be nice, just converted them with money, I wonder what the country would look like right now, having not dropped one bomb. I mean, it sounds a little crazy, but I'm not so sure that repeating these patterns that we get stuck in, this orthodoxy, we need a strong military. Got to bomb our way out of this problem. And if we don't do something, look what happens in Syria, for example. I mean, there are good arguments for this, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is much need for new ways of thinking.
Well, and
our
crucially, I think firstly, it's worth remembering that many of these new ways of thinking are actually old ways of thinking. They're very, very old.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about the happiness hypothesis. You realize how much science has just reinvented the wheel.
Yeah.
And crucially, if you look at what is John Nagel really talking about, when John Nagel, writes the counterinsurgency manual,
or how to eat soup with a knife.
Yeah. What is he really talking about? He's like, you need to offer people a better path, a better Tao.
Also, you need to also understand them first.
That's right.
You need to understand their culture,
which was very much what McNamara realized after Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great meme that somebody shared on the Mixed Mental Arts Facebook post. So I shared, there's a video of an ex-CIA operative talking about what she learned from dealing with all these ISIS insurgents and Al-Qaeda insurgents. And the crucial thing is to realize that everybody thinks they're a good guy. And that it's very much what McNamara was saying.
I had a Navy SEAL tell me that.
Yep.
I had a Navy SEAL who did had a lot of combat. He was a SEAL for 17 years, and he said, sometimes you would sit back and think that these are young men who actually think that they're doing the right thing, just like I did. And but I had to kill them.
Yeah.
And they weren't bad guys. They were young dum-dums who had been indoctrinated into a way of thinking, just like I had.
And somebody shared this great meme, which was, it was Luke Skywalker from Star Wars. And it says, a young man, after his family is killed by a large and powerful empire is indoctrinated into an ancient religion, rebels, and conducts a terrorist attack against a military target that kills 300,000 people. Mm-hmm. And there's a story that the Jedi would tell about what happened in Star Wars, which is that they're the plucky insurgents, they're fighting against an evil empire, blah, 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 blah. And then there's the story that the Empire would tell about the Jedi. Yeah. And it's very much the same pattern as played out when McNamara went and talked to the Vietnamese general. We thought that we were fighting a war against communism. They had obviously had 1,000 years of history before we showed up, and so they just saw us another colonial oppressor to be fought and resisted to the last man.
That's right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, because there's a guy who teaches a history course, and I can't remember what it is, but from the perspective of the East, of the losers in the two wars, of the people that didn't modernize as quickly. What was it like to be an Arab or somebody from India or somebody from Sri Lanka or somebody from China in 1945 after the Allies won the Allies? What was that like?
And there's Tamim Ansari's book, Destiny Disrupted, A History of the World Through Arab Eyes, or I think it's through Muslim eyes. And obviously they have a totally different view of history. Mm-hmm. And they have a totally different narrative. And crucially, it comes down to how do narratives work. So we draw off the same events, but we weight the events differently emotionally.
But don't you think there has to be dialogue about what truth is, though, right? I mean, in other words, there is a better way of doing things. I mean, when you organize your life and your society around the Quran, I think you and I would agree that has its benefits, but it also has more drawbacks than if you were to organize your society based on the principles in the Constitution, right?
Well, crucially, the issue is, firstly, is democracy a Western thing? Or is that just how human society works effectively? That's not clear to me. I don't necessarily think that democracy is Western. I think it's
it's been argued. I mean, there's a historian, I think his name is Kaplan, I read his book, that gives a great deal of the credit to not just the Greeks, demos, the people, but also to the Jews, who were democratic in their very sort of, to their core, just that, Moses was constantly even arguing with God, so debate, everyone has their say, everybody can make noise, and,
but
and
we have
has to be heard.
But we have a huge advantage here, which is that we have interviewed Richard Nisbett and read The Geography of Thought. And so we understand that atomism and holism are complementary mindsets, and that West blindly favors atomism and East blindly favors holism. And that, in fact, the best solution is one that knows when to, it has the wisdom to know the difference between when to use one or the other. Yeah. So I don't think that
Western medicine's a good example of that.
Exactly.
Eastern medicine. You've got specialists that can save your goddamn life, but there is something to be said about a holistic approach to the body, the human body.
And crucially, there's a guy, Tony Molina, who I really want to introduce you to, and he gives the example of the back. Let's say that you have back pain. Well, you go to your general practitioner. They say, oh, we're going to send you to a back specialist. The back specialist looks at the back, and they perform some surgery there and provide pain medication. Problem is the body is one physically interconnected system. So very often it's that your foot doesn't have the dorsiflexion necessary. It doesn't have the range of motion. So what happens is the forces from that are transmitted and it expresses itself in the back. That's where that stress shows up.
I have to meet this guy because I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So there's a couple
What's
of guys.
his name?
Tony Molina.
Well, what's he? Is he a physical therapist?
So he runs a place here in Los Angeles called the Rewire Project. He's an ex-Marine. And basically was doing all of those expedition races where they would go on like kayak for 24 hours. You're riding 50 miles on camels. He was a recon Marine. Jesus. And then he ended up getting leptospirosis on one of these expedition races.
What's leptospirosis? You remember words better than anybody I freaking know.
So
leptospirosis.
They're out in the jungles and there are like leeches attached to every part of their body. It's like extremely extreme stuff.
Happened to me in Indonesia. Yeah. Keep going.
So anyway, he comes back and he has some sort of medical problem because he's a veteran. He goes to the VA and they say, well, there are, they said there are 3 possibilities here. And one possibility is that you have rabies. Jesus. And if you have rabies, it's been too long and you're now going to die.
Oh my God.
There's nothing we can do.
Jesus.
The second possibility is that you have malaria, and that's its own thing. Or the third possibility, and this is what we're really excited for, you might have leptospirosis. And you would be only the second case in the history of the United States of leptospirosis.
Leptospirosis. And that is?
It's some sort of bizarre disease that you can catch if you're running around in the water.
Where's your phone?
Southeast Asia. I do not have my phone
God damn it,
with me.
Leptospirosis.
So he has leptospirosis, and it turns out that because somebody, he'd felt sick on the plane back, and the camera crew guy had given him an antibiotic, and it happened to be the right antibiotic. So by raw chance, that was probably what saved his life.
Wow.
But after that, what ends up...
Because it'll kill you?
I guess. I mean, we'll get him to tell you the full story. I may remember the name, but I don't remember all the medical details.
I can't wait.
But so what happens is then he has all these lingering medical problems. So he's cured, but his system isn't running properly. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. He has droop eye. This is a guy who was a recon Marine, so this is problematic for him. So he goes around and basically over the last 10, 15 years has collected all of these techniques that are designed to turn your body's systems on. So crucially, if you think about
they call it firing. Fire those glutes, fire those,
Oh, but it's beyond that, Brian. This is beyond that. So, for example, think about your body needs a certain threshold stimulus in order to tan. Mm-hmm. So you have UV light, it comes in, but only once you get past a certain level of UV light does your body say, oh, time to turn on melanin production. So it's the same thing with all the tissues of your body. So, for example, your bones. If you send an astronaut into space... then they lose bone density.
That's right.
They get osteoporosis and osteopenia.
Yep.
And it's because your osteoblasts, your bone cells, are not getting the signal that they need to upregulate bone density production.
Damn.
So what evolved out of all of this NASA research is biodensity. And biodensity is isometric exercise that puts your bones under force.
Yeah, they use elastic bands, I think.
Oh, no, this is beyond that.
Really?
And it was developed by a guy whose mother had osteoporosis, and he wanted to deal with it. And the problem is that you see people doing those little pink lady dumbbell weights to fight that, but you're not actually generating sufficient force. You have to get to 4.2 times your body weight before that upregulation happens. That happens when you're running, if you're running properly, because that impact is sufficient to switch that on. but most people don't have that lifestyle anymore. So this is a system that is designed to allow you to isometrically generate those forces, and you can produce insane pressures. But it basically, and he has people who come in, they've had a DEXA scan that shows that they have not enough bone density, and then they do the machine, and over the course of a year of doing this, 5 minutes for once a week or whatever it may be, they are able to go from osteoporosis to osteopenia all the way to healthy bone density.
Damn.
But this technique has not diffused into standard medical practice. Why? Because atomistic cultural biases in Western medicine. And so he and I are working to use all of the knowledge from the Diffusion of Innovations, all of this stuff from Richard Nisbett, and then you have to craft a narrative like the one that I just gave you that makes it so clear and so obvious that it allows you to move those ideas in.
Well, it's amazing how long these ideas about, for example, when there are a lot of reasons for this, but Ancel Keys and sort of the orthodoxy of nutrition, where they said, Joe Rogan just posted this commercial from the 70s, sugar may be exactly what you need to curb your appetite. So have a soda before you eat because you won't be as hungry. And the sugar lobby and, Ancel Keys, people said, basically, look, what's making you fat is animal fat and so basically you want to up your fiber, carbohydrates, and lower your fat. So, but when you take fat out of food, you need to add sugar. It'll taste like cardboard. So, comes in the obesity epidemic.
Yep.
And so, still, when you talk to people, you still hear them say, "I want that hamburger, but I don't want to put the weight on."
Yeah.
Hamburger ain't putting the weight on you, honey. It's the goddamn
soda.
Bun. It's the bun and the soda and the chips.
But these, that's a religion. There's a religion of nutrition, and it is not an adaptive religion, the current one that we have in the United States.
No.
And so you need to have conversion, you have to have missionaries, and that's in practice what we all are. Yeah. But there's a discomfort among some people with the idea that everything is a religion or everything is a cult, because they like to think that science is not a religion. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason why science is so ineffective at disseminating its beliefs.
Why, though? Because science isn't a religion in that it's responsive to evidence.
Science is an evolving religion. Okay. That's the big distinction. It's not that science is not a belief system. It's that it's an evolving belief system. And it is a constantly evolving belief system. It has evolved from the 1970s and behaviorism, right? So there was a religion within a science that B.F. Skinner established, a set of beliefs, and then that orthodoxy was displaced, and there became a new set of beliefs. And there was an orthodoxy that, for example, Richard Dawkins put up about, gene-centric evolution, and that is now being displaced with multi-level selection. But there are people who hold on to the old beliefs. Mm-hmm. And so the point is that science is an evolving belief system. That is its great success. Its great success is not that it has escaped belief, it's that it evolves its belief in light of evidence. And as more and more powerful tools and technologies come along, we're able to evolve better and better and better beliefs over time. So, but for some people, there's a discomfort with that, because they don't like to believe that science is a belief system. They like to believe that we have escaped the trap of human history, the trap of believing. And that trap is human nature, and you can't escape the trap of human nature. And so the challenge, if you really want to move scientific beliefs, you have to accept that you're a missionary. You have to accept that it's a belief system.
Well, that's what we said, too. What's the value of education? Well, knowing the difference between good ideas and bad ideas.
That's right.
But more importantly, also knowing how to articulate those ideas, and not just articulate those ideas to your echo chamber, to people that already are familiar with those ideas, but rather to simplify those ideas and bridge that gap. Get people to at least stop and think and question their own belief and value system.
And crucially, science wants to recruit converts.
Yeah.
Science wants to expand the umbrella.
It's almost like knowledge is not really... Yes, it's the first step is changing your own mind and getting a sense of how your brain thinks and how you work and learn. And sort of one of the tragedies for me is at 50, I'm finally understanding the art of learning. I'm getting out of my own way and just accepting and all that. But I'm 50. I wish I'd known that when I was younger, but it's okay. But then the second thing you want to do when you start to really reap those rewards and understand that is you want to get it out to other people.
Yeah, you want to pass on the gospel.
Yeah.
You want to share the message, and crucially, you have to understand, Brian, that there in many ways you could not have gotten this earlier. So cultural software improves over time. It's constantly evolving. Children now learn their colors and their numbers at a younger age than they used to.
Mm-hmm.
IQ has gone up 30 points on average since 1815 or whatever the Flynn effect numbers are. Things like the relative clause that English has. Many simple primitive languages do not have that because they simply don't have enough speakers for the wisdom of crowds to have shaped a tool like the relative clause. So constantly we're making better and better culture, and our job is to shape the best culture possible, disseminate it to people who are alive today so that the next generation starts further ahead.
That's what I say to people. You know, again, I'm always like, let me just tell you what not to do for a second. I spent so much time doing
but
then even that, I mean,
the first conversation that we had when I moved out here was you trying to save me a decade.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because you spent a decade avoiding the fact that you were an actor and a writer.
And I wanted all those
That's
things.
right.
Yeah, I was ashamed of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the job. Our job is to save people decades. So, crucially, and this is somebody that I'm going to also bring on the podcast and bring into the community, I have a friend who's a chef.
Yeah.
And she did the whole cordon bleu thing. She has been a private chef at a million different places, including the Playboy Mansion. She has amazing stories from there. And after all those years, she figures out a few core principles that she uses to think about food.
Really?
Yeah. And so I've been working with her to extract those. So when she's looking at the fridge, what is she thinking? What are the tests? What is the wisdom to know the difference that she uses to suss out what should and should not go in the dish? What is she looking for when she cooks a piece of steak? What are the sort of the visual cues and the olfactory cues, the smells that she's looking for? And what you find is when you talk to experts in any field, they've whittled down to a few core ideas.
Sure.
Everybody on this podcast has been bored with my core ideas.
But you're also, like, I have to say that the other thing is you start to learn how to do that with your own personality so that you start to get some control over your personality and it's not necessarily controlling you. Or if it is controlling you, I guess you learn how to surf rather than sort of thrash around. And I'll give you an example. Like, I am starting to forgive myself and embrace the fact that I am generally a neurotic mess. I mean, I just am. And so much of the rest of it is just resisting that idea, resisting the fact that that's really who I am. Fragile, ashamed, just worried, scared, hypochondriac, all of those things. Well, there's something really great about forgiving yourself for all those problems. You get older and you go, this is just who I am. This is who I am. I could get better at ignoring it, but I don't know if that's where the gold lies. No, the gold very well may lie in the fact that I'm just a guy who's constantly, I get a pain, I have cancer. I worry about fucking the drug cartel. How would I kill the drug? I mean, I got 1,000 things about being vulnerable and being worried. And I put my kids to bed and I'm like, God, I'm so lucky that they're not starving and they could have died today. There's a lot of ways. An eagle could have come down out of the sky. I mean, I have 1,000 fucking insane. The amount of time I spend worrying that something is going to go wrong. And it's all going to come crashing down.
And where did you get that
part
from?
Of my mother.
Yeah.
But but maybe it's genetic. But either way, thank God that's how I think because, it works for me. I wouldn't be the guy on stage that people seem to like without it. And I don't know. I'm trying to forgive myself. I'm trying to like myself for what I've been so ashamed of for so long. Because it's not very manly to be afraid. It's not very manly to be a hypochondriac. It's not very manly to be worried all the time. It's not very manly to be a fucking pervert. All these things that I am, the constant thoughts that I have no control over that are always racing through my head. But
Brian, this is an amazing example of kintsugi.
Yeah.
Because you have from your father this idea of perfect masculinity and this sort of hero, and from your mother You have this neurotic fear and concern and deep compassion and caring. And you've taken those two broken pieces of yourself and filled it in with gold, and that is your comedy.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that. It doesn't mean it's fun to live with, and it doesn't mean that, it's kind of what I was talking about with celebrity. I go to the Comedy Store, and now lots of people want to take pictures, and it's so flattering. My podcast, The Veteran Kid, 10 million downloads, and can you imagine if this thing got that? It'd be so incredible. But it's not as though I'm less worried. It's not as though things are. It's my house, my kids, everything is perfect. I have a puppy, all that stuff, and I can't even see it some days. I can't even fucking see it. I can't even sit back and relax and enjoy it.
But see, I think the key thing is that you've now moved it from something that you're ashamed of to something that you're acknowledging. And then I think the stage beyond that is the stage where you're not just inviting people to laugh at it, but you are really laughing at it yourself. And there's a reason why the Buddha is laughing. And it's because that laughter shatters your own illusions, and you've really separated all of those thoughts out from who you are.
Yeah.
And when you can really have that permission to be laughing at yourself, the laughing Buddha, that's, I think, the core of a lot of what enlightenment is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not even a good father sometimes. Like, I was thinking about that. Like, I don't have anything to say to my kids.
Yeah, but
sometimes I get so. Sometimes I think the other day I realized I had nothing to say to them. They wanted to play this terribly boring game, and I was so just wanting to not be hanging out with them. And then I called some of my friends who have kids, and they were all like, "Yeah, that's exactly right. It is not written anywhere that you have to play with your kids. They're very young and by definition moronic, and they want to play moronic games that they rig to win, and you just have to sit there and your knees are hurting because you're on the ground at face level, and et cetera, et cetera."
But even as you start talking about that, right?
It's becoming like a therapy session.
Well, no, but that's good. That's what we want. This is your cultural confession.
Yeah.
But so what emotion do you feel around that?
A failure, I think.
Yeah. And there's a sense of shame and a sense of guilt.
Yes, well, it's been the recurring theme, sir, of my life.
But
thank God. Again, thank God. I don't know if I'd be a comic without that.
Well, I think that's the key thing, though, is that, you can use that. You can use that in your comedy. But I think that what that forgiveness is about is coming to terms with that and understanding that it's going to be imperfect. And that the question is, in terms of even what is that you're trying to live up to something. Right, a certain model of parenthood or a certain model, an impossible ideal. And rather than giving yourself permission to grow, have that growth mindset into becoming the father that you want to be, you're just constantly measuring where you are today against this perfect goal that you feel you're so far away from. And I think that's the key, is giving yourself the permission to explore what fatherhood is. Explore what kind of parent you want to be, and discover and evolve to be a better parent. And you're never going to achieve perfect parent status. That doesn't exist.
Right.
Just as you're never going to achieve perfect comic status.
Yeah.
Some people will like your comedy. Some people won't.
It's all about the reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And getting closer, or at least getting. I don't even know if there's such a thing as getting closer. It's the wrong way to look at it. There is a deeper understanding.
Yeah, it's the hunt.
Yeah.
The fun is the hunt. It's being
the fun.
The fun. That was another terrible thing. Jesus. But see, the great thing is that I now know that that Twitter will now have so much fun with that.
The fun. Yes.
It's almost as bad as the.
As Sam Harris said, somebody's like Anna Applebaum. He was interviewing her about Donald Trump. She's a very, very fascinating interview, and she said, "Well, I don't." He said, "If you've heard of Twitter, she's got an amazing Twitter feed." And she said, "I don't know if I like being, I don't know how I feel about being distinguished from my Twitter feed." And he said, "We have to fight in the trench we are given," and that seems to be an important one at the moment. And it's really true.
Well, it's the battlefield of ideas.
Yeah.
And that's where That's where
People
it has.
Don't have a whole lot of time. They got how many characters?
That's
Get
right.
Your message across.
And crucially, all of these ideas that we've been talking about, most of them can't actually be communicated in 140 characters. Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a lot less than 140 characters. Now, the point is that just writing those words doesn't mean anything, but you share either the video of Trigglypuff, or you share a video that the Mixed Mental Arts community makes, or you write a song, And then if you write enough songs and make enough videos and enough short knowledge bombs like Kate is making, or like Jenkins B. Jennings is making, you get the community going and doing all these ideas, or awesome T-shirts. So, for example, in terms of thinking fast and slow, Nicole Lee Page and Matt the Unicorn Madonna made a T-shirt that is just a sloth hanging on a tree, and it says "Think Slow." And it's.
Can you please get? I'm going to order that T-shirt.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to order all the T-shirts. I'm going to Instagram them, and I'm going to tweet out where we can get those T-shirts.
Yep.
Where can we get those T-shirts?
It's on TeePublic.
TeePublic is
TEE.
Not mixedmentalarts.co?
Well, you can also get it on mixedmentalarts.co.
Go to mixedmentalarts.co. That should be the main hub that people go to.
Yep.
And that's where people contribute. Our next podcast needs to be about a book.
Yep.
And with an author.
Great.
So that's what we're going to bring you next, ladies and gentlemen.
And also, Brian, I have there are a couple of requests from the community.
Yes.
One request is Nicholas Varney requested that when we do a podcast, you and I do a short Instagram just to like let people say hi so they can see mostly your face.
Yep.
And then the other thing is that we've been talking about maybe you doing songs that in 1 minute sum up one of these books.
Yeah, we could do that. I'm not a musician, but
You're
I will do my best.
You're an amazing musician.
I will do my goddamn best.
Yeah. And then also I like the idea of you doing songs to members of the community to thank them. I can think of no greater reward for a human person than
Nate McCabe and Kate Fogarty and
a song from Brian Callen or anybody else.
All right, I'll do my best. Let me see if I can do that.
I think you can do it, Brian. I believe in you.
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, this has been another episode of Mixed Mental Arts.